Hey, everybody, back or more, I see. Well, so am I. But we have a first time offender or first time hazing, first time guest. I'm so excited, thrilled, and honored to have Johnny Fay of legendary Canadian band known worldwide, multi gold platinum artists, the Tragically Hip. Just watched their documentary over and over. It's a 4-part miniseries on Prime. If you don't have Prime, get it just for this. It's so worth it. Johnny, welcome.
Great to be here, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And one of the things we're going to talk about is let's just jump right into this. I want to show this an amazing box set available, originally released in 1989, I believe.
Yeah, I think that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is exciting. I mean, it's out with some new um, forms of medium that didn't exist back then really the same way. It's a wonderful package. Talk about this and what's it like so many years later, seeing this kind of breathe back into existence in a
Yeah,
new
come to
way.
fruition. Yeah, it was been a long time in the making, Dan, because we sort of found some tapes and then we lost them and then they were refound. And this particular uh, album and all this material came from a session we did with Don Smith, who was really one of our mentors and sonic gurus. And we recorded this in Memphis, Tennessee, which we were just as Canadian guys from a little town just north of Watertown, Syracuse, New York. We were
Hmm.
chuffed to be anywhere in the United States making music and recording in a legendary studio where ZZ Top had been and the Replacements had been, and REM Green was recorded in this very same studio on the same console.
Wow.
So, yeah, and then in those days, we just went in with a lot of extra gunpowder. We had extra songs, which we would sort of uh, record just count it off and get it done as you do when you're 20 because
Right.
you're ready to do it. And then those songs just sat there for 30 years, and
Wow.
we were just happy that we were able to get mixes of them by Don. So these are the last mixes that Don would have done because he's not with us anymore, unfortunately. And
Right.
so this is pretty comprehensive of that session in January, February of '88, I believe we would have recorded it. Yeah.
Wow. Just amazing to have that again. And you guys started out. I have a photo here. So young, and I think
Yeah.
one of your biggest accomplishments has been something that off the top of my head, and there's a lot of that, I can't think of a band that accomplished the longevity you guys have had without membership changes. There's been bands like the original lineup of Queen, of course, before Freddie passed. There's been Led Zeppelin, Bad Company, so many bands that stayed to the original lineup, but they didn't last 30 years. They didn't have the career you guys had from the time you were making records. And coming from Canada, and what was great to see, by the way, in the documentary is that there's words from Geddy Lee, Justin Trudeau, for goodness sakes, Dan Aykroyd, and being from Canada, and at the time you guys were busting out, you know, truth be told, there were only really a handful of very, very well-known artists in the US and in the UK and Western Europe, like Flash in the Pan band some may have heard of called Rush. There was April Wine, there was Neil Young, there was Triumph. When you guys were this young and starting out, did you weigh like what chances do we have, or was that never a thought and just go for it? This is our dream. We're going to make it happen, whatever it takes. What was kind of the conversations around that, Johnny, when you guys were so young?
Well, it's a great question because, back in the day, and I don't think it exists now. So that's the great question because I seem to find people that are individuals and they have this bass player is the keyboard in this, he's a keyboardist in this band. He might
Right.
play maracas in that band. And so our primary focus was we made a commitment to each other that we're going to go through this. It's gonna be a slow moving freight train, and just don't get in our way, because we're gonna keep cruising, you know. And so we saw these great things happen with bands, and especially look, the United States is our big brother, and so we would see these bands that were kind of similar to us, guitar rock and roll. I remember the Smithereens, the Del Fuegos, you know, bands that were doing it. So for us, it was just like a commitment to each other. We found like-minded people. We just happened to all go to the same high school together. So we didn't really sort of set out to conquer the world, but we knew that if we could do it on our own terms, like Rush, I mean, what a blueprint. Those guys, those guys did it, and they did it completely on their own terms,
Right.
beginning, middle, and ending. And you're right. Having Geddy Lee in the movie is really, really cool. I've said it before. It's like it's like a papal visit. Like, I mean, when Geddy speaks, that's very heavy. He's an incredible businessman. He's an incredible player. But Rush are all those things to us. They are, that's where we were shooting, to be able to do it on your own terms. And so that's where we were. Commitment to each other.
Yeah, that's something that's so evident in the documentary, that you guys seem to be, especially in the beginning, to get to that deal, we'll call it, to really break through. You guys were so much on the same page. And anybody that's been in any kind of band, there are going to be so many, if you haven't seen it yet, there's going to be so many aspects that you'll be able to relate to. And it was directed and created by Mike Downie, Gord's older brother.
Yeah.
And it's called The Tragically Hip No Dress Rehearsal. Great title, because it's all real and it's all going for the right thing, the right way, your way, and the big thing. And it's just the relationships. I've always said I was in a band until XYZ age, I think my early 30s, until I got tired of being married to 3 other effers and their problems and issues, and I'm sure mine. And I went in a different direction, started doing music for commercials and short films. So anyone that's been in a band will be able to relate to all the highs and lows and twists and turns that you guys went through as a family.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you just pinned it right there, that, you can't be a career band without having some tragedy. And we were always there for each other. And you're right. You're in the van with somebody, or you're in the bus with somebody, and sometimes people get on your nerves. And we just approached it like, with respect, and the way we wanted to be treated. And we were always there for each other too. There was always a checks and balance. If somebody's ego got a little out, the other 4 guys were there to sort of give you a little elbow in the ribs. And I think that that's important, that you can do that, and that's real friendship at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And the biggest highs and the deepest lows, and you guys really just stuck it out, right to the end. I want to talk about your drum sound for a bit and kind of geek out on gear a little bit.
Great.
One of the things that some of your early stuff reminded me of was a little bit of Stuart Copeland coming through on the snare drum, just so articulate, and it really transferred live. And I saw that for most of your career, from the time you were very young, you were playing Iotti drums. And for those who don't know, Ray Iotti created this custom drum company that did really well. Sounds great. And that drum sound on the album really transferred live. I loved the live footage and hearing that sound just punch through live. But then I want to jump ahead and show an image of this awesome kit from the Fully Complete tour. Can you talk about that a little bit? It looks like you've got an auxiliary. I just made up a word. You can use it in Scrabble.
I'm going to use
22
that. Yeah, I love that.
22, an auxiliary bass drum. It looks like maybe at 18 or 20 inch, and you've got a real deep. Talk about this setup in the kit, and what was the inspiration between what you were doing on a fairly traditional setup, same setup for quite a while, to go into something like this.
Well, this one was a really interesting one for me because I'm endorsed by Sonar and I have two really great sort of coveted drum kits. One, a buddy of mine bought from a guy in I said, I want to find this drum set, this Sonar kit. And they were special birdseye maple. And he said,
Mm.
I got a hold of this guy. And so he went into a parking lot in San Diego and he got him. And then we went down there months later, threw him on the bus. It was all legit. So then a Russian guy in.
Oh, now it's even sounding more legit.
That was even more legit. Yeah. A Russian guy just east of Toronto had this kit. So that's a 24-inch virgin bass drum. That's a 14 by 14 virgin floor tom. Then it also came with a 16 by 16 and 18 by 18 floor tom. So I went to this guy's place, I bought one bass drum and 3 floor toms.
Nice.
And I was like, wow, okay, well, I can make that tom. I found some guy in the States who had a special proprietary thing for like the rim system, but the rim system wouldn't work. It wouldn't link up with the lugs. And I found this guy, and he was wonderful. I wish I had his name at my fingertips, but he was the one who sorted me out with elevating this floor tom there. So you got it. I have the Kelly shoe on the inside of that one, and I have a Kelly shoe on the inside of the other one. So what I did was I had a bass drum, 3 floor toms that I tuned them up tight. And then I had 2 bass drums, 3 floor toms, and 2 snare drums. So I wanted 2 drum kits in one. And
that's nice. Yeah, and you could see that other snare, right?
Yeah, that's right.
There.
So that snare drum is a very special one. That came from Chicago. That was a Slingerland, and it almost was like buckling. It was this famous drummer named Barrett Deems. He's an American drummer, and apparently the story goes that Buddy Rich was overheard one night saying he's actually faster than me. And so Barrett Deems played with Louis Armstrong. And so I went to Steve Maxwell in Chicago. I'm kind of threading a whole bunch of stuff together here.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
And my drum tech, Mike Cormier, worked for Charlie Watts. So he got me in the door with Steve Maxwell, who's a beautiful man and is the premier guy in the United States. So we go to Chicago. I find this kit. He flies some kits in for me. I wanted some Gretsch. And then I said, what's that drum kit over there? Is that for sale? And it was a Slingerland. So it would have been the same depths that Neil Peart would have used. Anyway, that's that snare drum from that very famous kit. 12 lug Slingerland, high pitched. You can crank this thing. I've never, ever changed the head on that. But what's really interesting, what's really interesting about this kit is that DW, and we looked and looked and looked, they make this supplementary drum pedal that it goes that way as opposed to the other way.
Yeah.
And what I was able to do was I was able to have my hi-hat where I normally keep it. And then this other supplementary bass drum, which I could switch. I could just move my foot over 3 inches and I'd be playing the little wee bass drum. And then I could play the main bass drum. But then when I got cocky, and as I got to know the kid a little bit later, I could play both bass drums at the same time. And I could position my foot where I could get them flamming.
Like a flam,
and and it would thicken the bass drum, even live. So
and what was the tone difference like, Johnny? What was the tone difference?
Well, that one on the right, or I guess it would be my left, is a 15-inch Bubinga floor tom.
Yeah.
So that's what was going on there.
Wow.
And then they are all symbol-wise, Paiste, they're all crash cymbals, 18, 20, and 24 inch. So I just had a whole bunch of bass drums, floor toms,
and crash cymbals
and crashes, just because I wanted this. We were playing hockey arenas, so I thought might as well get out there and smash it. And it turned out to be one of our very final tours, that kit. But I've been with Sonar for a very long time, and then gone to Hayat and Yamaha, and then back to Sonar, and I'm with them now, and they just don't. They just overbuild. Germans don't build anything sort of whimsical. They
Right.
build it. They build it. Cars, dishwashers. They're indestructible, and their drums are. They're coming up on their 150th year of being a drum company.
Wow. That's
This NAM
amazing.
show coming up 2025.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
I marvel at Sonar.
Yeah. That's interesting. Now I have to show this other work of art of a drum set. There
Yeah,
you guys are on your
that's right.
farewell
Yeah,
tour, and we got. Let's see if I could zoom in on this one. There we go.
yeah,
Talk about this. It looks like part cocktail kit. You got a conga drum there.
yeah, yeah.
What's going on here?
So I forget where I was. I was I think it was in San Francisco, and I got this little Gretsch round badge Max Roach snare drum. And then after San Francisco, we were going to LA, and I phoned up the great drum doctor in Los Angeles, and Ross Garfield, one of
Yeah.
the greats of all time, and he took this snare drum and he matched it up with the rest of the cocktail kit, the little tom and everything like that, and he
Yeah.
had it singing. He not only had it looking great, but Ross, he matched everything up, and then he had it sounding really great. And I didn't even think about it until we were in this situation with Gord when he was diagnosed, and we had to keep the volumes really very quiet. And so I thought, I've got this. I knew I wanted one. I just didn't know what I was going to use it for. And then all of a sudden, there it is. So
Amazing. And was it just the set of hi-hats and that one cymbal?
it was. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. And it
Yeah.
sounds great on video. Oh my
And I had
gosh.
a guy, well, you know what? I'm not going to lie. We had a hell of a time getting like a proper pedal for it because they make new ones and then the old ones are hard to find. So
Right. It had to be
um,
up on the
there was
bottom half.
the guy in Toronto who's a master drum builder by the name of Seppo. And
Mm.
a lot of guys know him up here. He built some stuff for Charlie Watts because the Stones would do a lot of rehearsing in Toronto before they got on the road. And he built this proprietary little drum thing that actually had a trigger inside the beater. It wasn't in on the drum. He did
Oh,
it he stuffed it in the beater, and it was very unique. And it blew my mind because it was always there. So we had an acoustic
interesting.
sound that we mixed with a trigger, just to make sure that we had it all. And then
Yeah.
on up top were to my left, two Lindrums, an LM1 and an
Oh,
LM2. Yeah, yeah,
nice. Very cool. I want to go back to your music, which folks, if you're not familiar with the whole catalog of the Tragically Hip, it was really interesting the way the the evolution of your music unfolds in the documentary. I mean, there's elements of so many things from folk to grunge to elements of punk and blues and rock. It's like everybody's influences and growth from
yeah.
young musicians came out in your music. And it seems like Road Apples really lit the fuse for your future really blossoming as musicians, but also as your career and appeal to more people. Did you guys feel that way with that album as well?
Well, we knew we were in New Orleans, so we were in a house this time,
Right.
and we were back with Don Smith, who had done stuff with Keith Richards, solo record, and the Traveling Wilburys. And Traveling Wilburys, I think some of that was in Tom Petty's house, which his house burnt down, and he had to rent a house from Charo. So he
Yeah.
rented this house, and they went in there and made a record. So it was pretty cool the way that he approached being in this house in New Orleans, and we knew it was very live sounding. Things were bouncing off the walls, and in those days I had because I'd been to Memphis, the previous record, I went to Robert Hall's Memphis Drum Shop and got two, a brass and a wood, Montanari soprano snare drums.
Mm.
And that's what that sound is. I used Daniel Lanois bass drum, which was like a 32 or 26 or something like that, marching
Wow.
bass drum. That was my bass drum. And then I used a soprano snare drum that was nice and, crisp.
Yeah.
And that was the sound,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you guys know where you were going from there? Like once you got out on the road and the dust settled from that album? Because they said I've heard over and over the hardest act to follow sometimes is your own, and that
Yeah.
was a breakthrough album for you guys. Did you how much on the same page were you all at first as to where to go from there? Did it require a lot of discussion, experimentation, or did it just organically unfold to the next album?
I think very much organically let it be. We had a lot of faith in Don, and I also think that we've been on the road as players, and we got to know each other with that previous record. And one thing you can accuse us of is that we're never ever interested in making part B of the previous record we'd made. We were always up for the adventure. Gord Downie especially, he was more into people's enthusiasm. It didn't matter if they could make a record. He was just like, just throw some mics up and we'll get it. And
Yeah.
and so there was that, we bring our influences to it, and then we bring our, well, we should work with this guy. Well, I don't care about that guy. I think we can work with this guy. And then eventually it's like, let's just go do it. And Gord used to say that too, and we knew it, that no one's ever going to take the hip out of our sound. So
Right.
to a certain extent, you just got to let the guy paint the house that you've hired to do it, and that's the way we approached it. We were never really interfering. And if somebody would voice an opinion, yeah, that's great. But if you really pushed it, there's the elbow and the ribs again.
Mm.
So we were very respectful of not only each other, but the people that we'd hired to help make us, to help get us there.
Well, all of that worked because Fully Completely is just an astounding, follow up. And, you revisit some of the same methodology, the way, returning to just jamming and whatnot for day for night. But then what was it like finally arriving at Maple Leaf Gardens? That's like when I say the US, it's like the US's LA Forum. I was literally born down the street from the LA Forum where I
Yeah,
saw my first concert, Led Zeppelin, or our Madison Square Gardens. I
yeah,
mean, every
yeah.
big concert, every big hockey game, every big event. What was it like playing there?
Well, the
And how
very
old
first
were you
time,
guys then? I'm sorry, how old were you too at the time?
well, the very first time we went in there, we were asked to open for Rush, and we were sort of an add-on at the very end and we learned this from Rush, that they would play Toronto and they wouldn't take money. They would give it to charity. And so we had this gig where they asked us to come on and play with them for the United Way. And so that was our first stepping on the stage. And then a couple of years later, we went in and were able to sell enough tickets to do a Maple Leaf Gardens. It's now a supermarket, so it's still there. It's now
Really?
a yeah, it's a supermarket now. Well,
Wow.
they preserved it in the best possible way. It's still called Maple Leaf Gardens, but it's a Loblaws, which is like a chain,
Wow.
and not like Piggly Wiggly, but kind of, sort of that kind of vibe,
Wow. So I wonder how many people go shopping there and discreetly like put their ear to the wall and see what is still vibrating from over
I
the
think there's a
years.
certain population that does, and I think there's probably a certain population that has no idea what it is. You know,
Probably, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Then
So
you guys moved to producing your own stuff in your own house in Bath. Um,
short lived in a good way. You can do yourself producing and you can get into trouble. We did one and it was good. And then when it came to the second one, our manager had actually suggested, he said, I think you need a producer and I think you should use Steve Berlin. And that
mhm.
turned out to be one of the great introductions that we had. We were on the road with Los Lobos, and Steve was really amazing. And not only a musician, a composer, he got it. He got us. He got a band. You know, he understood it. And there were things he didn't meddle with, which is huge because producers want to put their vibe on everything. Some of them,
Yeah.
and other guys are like, "That's good. That's halfway finished. You need to retrack this." And then that became Phantom Power,
Yeah. And
and our biggest song to date.
yeah, quite a shift to that album, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we were still experimenting and we were having fun in this house, but it could have gone a different direction. And I think that, sort of pulling us over to the curb and saying, you're not all that in a bag of chips. You still have to, deliver music if you want to keep making, getting money from a record company. So it was a wise decision.
That's awesome. It seems like portrayed in the film that it was your idea for the Fully Completely 20th anniversary tour to become, I guess, what became leading into the farewell tour. Is that correct?
Well, we had looked for Fully Completely because we'd made that in England, and then all the tapes kind of get sort of distributed around the planet. Back in those days, the first two records we made were 40 rolls of tape, and then I think Road Apples was 60 rolls of tape. You know,
Wow.
MCA is looking like there's a guy who's coming in and looking at it and saying, "Whose tapes are those?" Well, let's put those in a warehouse. I don't know that band. So tapes get distributed, and we actually found some in a mine shaft in Pennsylvania because they
Oh,
take
wow.
abandoned mines and then sort of make encase
Like
them
a
in.
vault?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they dehumidify them, and then so underground in Pennsylvania, there's tons of Tom Petty tapes and Hip tapes, and
Wow.
yeah. So they're scattered around the planet. But my parents are English, and we'd recorded in England, and I had this card from this girl that I found in the Bahamas. I was introduced to her, and she worked for Universal Music. So I did the old-fashioned thing, and I picked up the phone and I phoned this girl and said, "Can you help me find these tapes?" And she said, "Yeah." 4 days later, there they were. So people
Wow.
didn't want to, I'm not blowing my own horn, but I wasn't getting the answer I wanted. And sometimes you just got to keep digging. So
Yeah.
I found those tapes, yes, without the help of this girl in England, I never would have found them. And her dad, by the way, is Mike Hug. I forget her first name. I know her sister, Sarah.
Mm.
Her her dad is Mike Hug, and Mike Hug you would know as the drummer of you would have heard him as the drummer of the Manford Man Band.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Sarah Hug and I are friends, and her
Nice.
sister helped me find these tapes. So then when we had
Wow.
them and remastered by the great Bob Ludwig, we it was time we weren't getting people into big venues anymore, and so this was a way that we were able to do it.
That's
So yes.
awesome. So there's a wonderful, for those who haven't seen it yet, there's a wonderful, what I would call a postscript in the film in the last episode of Gord, and that has nothing to do with music, but
Mhm.
it's would you agree that it's probably was felt by him to be, and maybe he told you this, one of his greatest accomplishments to do what he did with the indigenous people of Canada and fulfilling kind of that spiritual, um, what would you even call that path that he had in the, yeah,
Calling, yeah,
calling,
yeah,
and the work
yeah,
that he did with them was such a touching part of the story.
yeah. Well, Gord always liked. He was the kind of guy that if you were engaged in a conversation with him, he was there for you. He wasn't looking over shoulders, and he liked conversations, and he knew he got a lot out of it. And so if he sat and talked to one person for an entire evening, it was about the experience. It was about learning something. He was always open to learning something, and people would grab his ear and tell him about things that were going on right here in the country. And he always wanted to use his voice in a good way. And he didn't abuse that, which is, some people will get up on pontificate about everything.
Yeah.
And he was very focused on this. And he would make these trips up to northern Canada, and he would see what was going on, and he knew it was wrong. And he, could with lyrics, he could exacerbate these things, and he could get people motivated to do things. And again, he didn't abuse his voice, but he really was pointed and directed with it. And so it was his life's most important work, and
Yeah.
some people said he called the prime minister out, but he didn't, because Prime Minister Trudeau is our friend, and we've known him for a long time. He used to come and see us when we played in Montreal. And so he was pointing out that if there was a guy that was able to do the job, that this was our man. And that's
Yeah.
that's what he did.
That's
So yeah,
awesome. Awesome.
yeah.
As an artist yourself, Johnny, what are you most proud of all your many accomplishments?
I really I was talking to someone the other day. I have two little boys, and they're 10 years old. And they asked me questions about the band. They don't really know a lot about the band because they were young when we'd finished, but they want to know the things that they're like, who's the best guy? Who was the guy who told the best jokes? And I would say Robbie. Robbie had the best delivery, and he never laughed at his own jokes like your old man does. And they would say, well, who was the smartest guy in the band? I said, well, that was Gord Sinclair, without a doubt. Robbie, uh, Paul, and myself, we'd say that he's
That's
very, very
funny.
smart. And then Paul had great stories that he was able to tell, and you hear that in his solo work. Now he's telling those stories, and so I think it's our. Legacy is a really big word, and when you're involved in something, you don't sort of say, well, our legacy. But I think our body of work really speaks to who we were, what we did. We don't kind of rest on it, but it's kind of there. It is. And so it's taken me that 40 years to sort of look back and say, I might not have always lived in the moment, but I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of that we were able to survive it and
Yeah.
stay intact. And we were able to do this tour at the end of it. I think of Aerosmith. They were an influence on us, and Steven Tyler has something that's not threatening his life, but he can't physically do it. And Gord
Yeah.
had something that was threatening his life and ultimately took him, but he
Yeah.
built himself up and he pushed. And I think that we learned a lot from him about pushing for things that you want to do, you want to express yourself as a musician. You get out and do them, because no one's going to do them for you.
Yeah. It's just amazing depiction of that in the documentary of, Mr. Baker even being very transparent, saying, I didn't believe it was going to happen even the day before the first show. And then there you guys go, show after show after show. And if no one knew, they would never have known watching those performances that anything
Yeah.
like that was in the background, or which became very public, but was going on. The performances by everybody, of course, including Gord, were just phenomenal. I mean, what a way to put a cherry on the top of such a wonderful career before he left. Just amazing. I'm getting
Yeah.
goosebumps. You guys got to see this. You folks have got, no matter what kind of music you're into, if you're music fans or musicians yourselves, you've got to take the time to see this. It's just so, so wonderful.
Oh,
What's
thank you,
next
Dan.
for you?
Well, I've got some things that I'm doing. I made a little record, and I'm just trying to figure out where it would be. It's an instrumental record with drum
Right.
machines, and I sort of went the other way. And I had some friends play on it, and it's just music that maybe who knows, maybe I'll just listen to it. I worked with some really interesting people, and it's if I play it for people or friends, they say, "Wow, that's not what I expected." So I like that. I like sort of, I haven't played drums in a while, not gonna lie,
Hmm.
because I'm on school duty, which I love. I love that,
Great.
and I watch my kids play, and so I sit behind my son, Will, who's very, very into playing now, but he's a lefty. So I got to rig up the kit like I did with that big sonar kit. I got to rig
Right.
something up for him because I want him to play the way he feels good about it.
Yeah.
And sometimes he plays open, and I say, "Oh, Simon Phillips, man,
Yeah.
Carter from the Dave
Drew
Matthews Band." I said,
Buford.
"Wow,
Yeah.
if I could go
Billy
back and
Cobham. Yeah.
those
All
guys,
those
the
guys.
hi hat, that's just this crossing
Yeah.
over. Do you have to do it? No." And I point out to him, you get comfortable on your seat. All those things, is there a proper way to play the drums? Yeah, there is for you. Each individual. Our legs
Exactly.
are different lengths, and our arms
Exactly.
might be flailing. And my Italian drum teachers, they always explain things beautifully to me.
Yeah.
I'm really loving that. I want to show
How
you
old is he?
something. I want to
Okay.
show
And
you
how
something.
old is he, Johnny?
He's 10. I have
Wow.
twin 10-year-old.
Oh,
One's
so
playing
they're
the
already 10
saxophone.
now.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Just one sec. I got to
Okay.
show you
Sure.
this
Sure.
because this is cool. I got these from a guy in Philadelphia, and I had a flood at my house, but
Oh, good grief.
these didn't get hurt. And so look at this. This
Oh,
is
wow.
this is his 12-inch tom, but look at that red sparkle.
Yeah.
These were sitting in guys. I'm not very good with the stems.
Beautiful.
So I got him this open kit, 12, 13, 16 floor tom, and it's red sparkle. It's very Chico Hamilton. And
Nice.
so, yeah, yeah. And
Nice.
so I got him from a guy in Philadelphia. And so I'm getting him on his acoustic kit, and we're putting towels on them. And I'm explaining about Ringo and moon gels. And it's a new world for me. So I'm loving it.
That is
Will's
great.
coming along on the kit. And I encourage everyone to play drums because it's one of my first drum teachers, Jim Blackley. He said, if you can dance, you can play the drums because you're just taking all those muscles and applying them to sticks and pedals. And it's about playing the drums, not hitting the drums. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to just not intervene too much in Will's playing, but just
Let it
let
unfold.
him do it. Let him do it. Yeah, let
Yeah.
him do it. And I think that's what I'm doing these days, and it's
That's
beautiful.
great.
Yeah.
You mentioned something that I just love. It's such a great topic. You could take a saxophone, a clarinet, a guitar, a bass, a piano, almost any other instrument besides drums, and it's going to be orientated the same way. The valves of a sax will always be in the same place, a flute, a clarinet, a bassoon, the keys on a keyboard, but drum sets can be whatever we want them to be. And I think that is so neat. It's almost like a whole other creative palette that drummers get to exercise rather than, well, this is how it's set up. I
Yeah.
love that aspect of what we do.
Yeah. I was in New Orleans once at the Maple Leaf Tavern, and it was packed, and it was late at night, and this guy was playing drums, and it was like offline Zydeco stuff, and I was like, this guy's incredible. So I worked my way up to the stage, and I looked, and he had no hands, and
Oh,
he had these sticks that were velcroed to his wrist, and he had sort of a few digits on one hand, a few fingers on one hand and none on the other. But he had this sort of setup for it, and that guy grooved like nobody I've ever heard before in my life, and it was amazing. I'd had my eyes closed, and then when I went and watched him, and there was nothing awkward about the way he played. Then when I went back to the studio the next day, and I chatted with some people, they said, "Yeah, we know that guy. He's great. He was in a fire."
oh,
And
Ray
he was a
Laviere,
drug. Yeah,
Ray,
yeah,
Ray Laviere.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Ray, good friend of the show, good friend of mine. He's
Oh my God,
amazing.
he really is amazing. And I thought, my God, what he must have gone through, and but he persevered, and
Yeah,
he had a groove like I was. And I said, there you go, there you go. There's the answer right there.
I see
Don't let,
videos
don't
of
let, don't.
his every day, and the first thing that comes to my mind is
Yeah.
I do not practice enough.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
just
yeah,
so
yeah.
good.
I was like that too. My God, he had an incredible groove, and I never forgot his playing, and I was just so blown away by what he must have gone through, and so I took that away with me that I'll never forget, and I can only tell people that story about my time in the States and hearing these great players everywhere, you know.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's great. Um, you talk about great drummers. I believe you have a story about Gene Krupa.
I do. You know what? We used to go through Buffalo or Detroit, depending on where in the States we were going. We'd have a bus, and they got to know us pretty well, the U.S. guys. Sometimes when we come back into Canada, if we went into uh, it was kind of funny. They'd rip the bus apart. But in the States, sometimes the guys would come on, and Buffalo, which is like second home for the hip. They're always very gracious. But we went through this time in Detroit once, and so we're just getting ready to go. We've given the passports. We sat like church mice there, and this guy, this very big guy, who kind of looked a little grumpy, said, "Okay, you guys can go. I want to see the drummer over here." And I was like, "Oh God!" And he had my passport, and he held it, and he gave the other guys their passports. You guys can go on the bus. And I was like, "Oh God, what have I done?" And then so he said, "You're the drummer?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah." He goes, "I have been doing this job for 30 years. My dad did it before. That's how I came into this, and I have worked at this border crossing for a very long time." And I was sitting here one night, and two white limousines showed up. It was just started to snow, and they were going from Detroit, going or they were coming back. I forget which way they were going, but it was very late, and there were two. And we looked in the back of the Cadillac limousines, and there were no seats, but there were these tubes and some blankets over something. We lifted them, and we looked, and it was exactly the same in one limo to the other. And he said, we called the guy in and we chatted with him. And he said, "You know who it was?" And I said, "No idea." He goes, "It was Gene Krupa." So the guy who was setting up his drum kit was his drum tech, and he had the identical car and the identical kit.
Oh, wow. How neat.
And then Gene was driving the lead car, had the white Cadillac, no back seat,
Yeah.
his whole kit. So he had two. He traveled, and I was like, wow. And then he would have gone up
Wow.
and played with the band. It scared the bejesus out of me when he called me over, but I love that story.
How
That
neat
he
of him to want to share that with you.
exactly. I thought he said, "Have a great tour." He was very jovial at the end, but I loved hearing that story too about touring in those days in the United States and
Yeah.
Canada. How going over the border was still sort of a bit of a thing. So yeah.
Right. Interesting. But Johnny, I want to thank you. I want to be respectful of your time. I want to thank you so much. Well, I would love to do this again. And folks, you've got to check this out. Up to Here Deluxe box set. It's the re-release. Originally came out in 1989. It's the 1988 sessions. Just a beautiful piece of work. And you've got to get Prime Video if you don't already have it, so that you can see the Tragically Hip No Dress Rehearsal. Just a phenomenal film. Just such a great body of work that you've delivered to the human race, and thank you for that. From
Thank you,
musicians to
Dan.
music
Thank you
fans.
so much. Great
Absolutely.
chatting with you.
Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for following what we do here on Drum Talk TV and joining Johnny Fay and myself. Lots more to come as we wind down the year. I can't believe it's November.
I know.
November 6th, our producer, my son, Stephen Shinder's birthday, the youngest of our blended family. He's 8 years old. He's our producer. No, I'm kidding. He's 30 today. I don't know, Steve, if I was supposed to say that, but happy birthday to Stephen.
Happy birthday, Steve.
Huge fan as well. And folks, we'll see you soon. Johnny, hang on the line with me for a moment. Thanks, everybody.